We think that what's going to be unlocked is by the combination of the cloud and these sensors that and machine learning and artificial intelligence, that patterns that are important for getting products to market faster will be identified less expensively at a lower cost of capital, and products will get to market, and healthcare and synthetic biology solutions for replacing petroleum will happen faster than ever before. So hopefully ushering in a new era of prosperity for the world.
Our podcast today is brought to you by DZS Clinical Services, a small premier CRO with international full-service capabilities. DZS is a technology-enabled CRO bringing the best tools in the industry combined with expertise and an understanding that clinical development companies need partners, not just service providers. If you need a CRO to help support some or all of your next project, check them out at www.dzs.com. And don't forget to subscribe. And I have one more favor to ask before we jump into the show. If you like this episode, please share it with just one person you think might benefit or gain some insights from it. On today's show, we're joined by John Moore. John is a lifelong investor, entrepreneur, and currently chairman of Scientific Industries, among a couple of other companies. John bought his first public company at 17. Since then, he's been involved in a variety of industries, including new materials, defense, energy, medical devices, and biotech. John is a veteran investor and leader in both the life sciences business and business in general. And he's experienced both big hits and some misses. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Greg.
You got it. You have an incredibly rich and interesting path that I really want to get into. But first, let me ask you this. I've heard you describe yourself as a magnificent amateur, and I really like that description, but I think it has meaning on multiple levels. Tell me what you mean when you call yourself that.
Well, sometimes the emphasis is on magnificent, and sometimes the emphasis is on the word amateur. So, what I've found is that if you have stackable skills that you can sort of apply them, the technology always changes, but people never do. So if you can understand people and understand, what problems the industry is facing and what growth opportunities there are, it's applicable across industries.
That's great. You mentioned stackable skills, and I want to talk a little bit about that. And I usually like to start with the journey first, but in this case, let's get right into Scientific Industries, because this is particularly interesting to me. I started my career as a bench research assistant many, many years ago at Boston University. And what I see you and Scientific Industries doing right now is cutting edge stuff. Can you talk a little bit about how you and Scientific Industries are changing the way research is being performed?
Absolutely. So the company was started in 1954, and they developed the original Vortex Genie mixer. And this mixer, as you know, there's 10 or 20 in most labs. We've sold over 1 million of them to date. It exists in virtually every life science lab in the world. And so, the nature of research right now is, and has been in the past, very manual. So what we've done is developed optical sensors, very small optical sensors that can be put in any type of biologic experiment that can tell you what's happening to the culture in real time. So we licensed these sensors to a company called Sartorius. They sold over $1 billion of equipment using our sensors and paid us royalties on that. And so now what we're doing is we're launching, as that license is expired, we're now launching a line of products that we call digitally simplified bioprocessing tools. And specifically what we're doing is we're launching the first miniaturized multi-parameter sensor that can go in a shake flask or a tea flask, and it can be deployed in the thousands across laboratories for research, process development, and manufacturing. So what we're trying to do is change the nature of research from time-based monitoring, and a lot of it manual, to condition-based monitoring in real time with millions of data points that can then be structured by the researchers to be manipulated by artificial intelligence and machine learning.
That's amazing. So creating efficiencies and making more data available for future use at the same time.
Absolutely. And we think that what's going to be unlocked is by the combination of the cloud and these sensors that and machine learning and artificial intelligence, that patterns that are important for getting products to market faster will be identified less expensively at a lower cost of capital, and products will get to market, and healthcare and synthetic biology solutions for replacing petroleum will happen faster than ever before. So hopefully ushering in a new era of prosperity for the world.
You mentioned before stackable skills, and I mentioned in the intro the number of different industries and organizations that I know you've been involved with. I'd like to talk a little bit about your journey. When you talk about stackable skills, how does that work from industry to industry? Do you have to fully reinvent yourself? Do you bring in complementary skills? How does that work in your experience?
Well, so I first heard about stackable skills from Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, and he referred to himself and said, well, I am not the best humorist, I'm not the best business thinker, and I'm not the best cartoonist, but there's a Venn diagram where those three talents overlap, and I am the best business, cartoonist, humorist, and has made a spectacular living at it. So, in my case, my stackable skills tend to be my knowledge of knowing how to raise money for emerging growth companies, how to identify small companies that are that have some huge off-balance sheet asset that hasn't been recognized, and some trend that's related to it. And then my ability to be able to sell and prospect and recruit great people to help me build those businesses.
Incredible skills, great, extremely useful in a number of ways. So, and speaking of which, and I know you've been involved in raising money, building organizations, acquiring organizations, and a lot of our audience will be at that particular stage in their career, developing a new organization, looking for equity partners, or maybe even looking for potential acquisitions. Can you talk a little bit about your framework, your decision-making process as you look at either a potential equity partner or a potential acquisition, whatever's most relevant to you?
Well, maybe I'll give a quick example of one that was pretty spectacular. I found what I generally look for is small public companies, because it's easier to raise money generally for public companies than it is for private companies, because 2008 taught us that liquidity has a value. So I found a small publicly traded company. It was on the pink sheets, and they owned 15%. They were the largest shareholders of a company that did a field called demand response. So when big electric power companies were having a period of blackout, they would basically, they built networks by putting load switches on people's air conditioners and hot water heaters, and the utility could push a button, a public pager network would dial back the demand across 350,000 air conditioners in a service area and prevent a blackout. Well, we acquired that company for, it was at a $10 million market cap. And then because everybody was interested in clean tech, we ended up taking that company public for $250 million through Citigroup. And then we did a secondary where we sold all our shares through Goldman Sachs for $600 million. So in that case, it really was a sleeping giant. The world was interested in clean tech. Newsweek said we were one of clean tech's 6 most important companies. And so I was able to make a nice fortune for our shareholders and unlock a lot of value. So it's generally things like that where I'm sort of looking for something that we live in an incredibly dynamic era right now, And there's lots of opportunities like this. So it's a target-rich environment.
Very different from life sciences, biotech, pharma. Is there a common theme between your business interests in general?
Well, generally, the common the interest is that there is some pain point out there in the world, and how do you find pain, and how do you find somebody that has figured out a way to alleviate that pain? And generally, it takes, I'm buying companies where people are sort of dying on the finish line, and what they need is a fresh injection of enthusiasm and investor capital, and somebody that's made money for investors before, to give me a shot to build a team around that founding team's vision.
Absolutely. Yeah. So speaking of pain points, right, coming back to the life sciences, drug development, device industry, we know the life cycle for bringing new entities to market is incredibly long and incredibly expensive. You're at the beginning stages, you with scientific industries, the very early stages of that process. What do you see as potential pain points at the moment, and what's exciting to you about the future of health tech?
Well, I think one thing that's very interesting is that the convergence between digital tools and science, essentially. So, you got great technologies like CRISPR-Cas9 digital gene editing tools. And if you can combine, like in the case of what we're doing, is we're combining digital healthcare plus innovations like CRISPR-Cas9. It's being done in desktop gene editing systems like by companies like Inscripta. But every breakthrough in a high throughput system like that creates other problems. So, if now you have 100 hits and you need to turn them into leads, you need to screen and classify them. So we're building systems in shake flasks that can basically rank and classify those leads, basically, that are created by the CRISPR-Cas9 system at 10% of the capital cost and 10% of the operating cost, so the companies can get their products to market faster.
That's great. And I think that's a great place to end this episode. John, thank you so much for being here today. If our listeners were interested in reaching you or asking questions about scientific industries, how can they reach you?
I'm at jmoore, MOORE, at scientificbio.com. Thank you so much, Greg, for including me in this episode.
Absolutely. All right, that's the end of our show. Thank you so much for joining. Please don't forget to like or subscribe or share this episode with someone if you think it's of interest. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.